supplies they needed. He was relentless in teaching his students to refuse to let socioeconomic obstacles block their dreams and their progress. And so it was no surprise that he was named the state's youngest school principal a few short years after he started teaching. As principal, it also won't surprise you to know that he was one of those principals that knew every kid's name, knew every kid's story. He dressed up as a conductor for Polar Express Day. He performed with the students at holiday concerts, and he relentlessly built a community of teachers, students, and parents. He led by example. And so the promotions kept coming. He tackled teacher diversity as assistant superintendent in Meriden. He championed the cause of replacing draconian exclusionary school discipline policies with restorative justice practices. And as has been mentioned, as our state's commissioner, he led the effort to reopen Connecticut's schools earlier than most people thought was possible. And he did it in a way that didn't divide teachers from students and parents. Miguel Cardona keeps getting asked to do bigger things for a reason. He has a servant's heart, an immovable moral compass, a refusal to take no for an answer, and a unique talent for consensus building, something that will be essential in this job. He's going to make a great Secretary of Education, and I'm so glad to join Senator Blumenthal in expressing Connecticut's pride and support for him today.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Dr. Cardona, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. We are looking forward now to hearing from you so you can begin your testimony. Thank you.
Chair Murray, Ranking Member Burr, distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today as the President's nominee to serve as Secretary of Education. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Murphy, for your kind words and support. Soy Miguel Cardona, husband of Marissa and proud father of Miguel Jr. and Celine, son of Hector and Sarah Cardona, and brother to Hector Jr. and Marisol. Their role in my life has shaped my preparation for today's hearing as much as any degree or professional experience I've had. While the pandemic has prevented all of them from joining me in the room today, I carry their presence in every word I speak. We're here today in the midst of one of the most challenging school years in American history. For far too many of our students, this year has piled on crisis after crisis. As a parent and as an educator, I've lived those challenges alongside millions of families. The burden on educators and families has been tremendous, taking a toll on the mental health and well-being of our children, our parents, our educators, and staff. Fewer students started college this fall, and those declines were most striking at community colleges, institutions that have long served as entry points to higher education and economic mobility for so many. Our nation's educational challenges didn't begin with the pandemic, but it has exacerbated inequities in our educational system. These inequities will endure, and they'll prevent the potential of this country unless tackled head on. And so it's our responsibility, and it would be my greatest privilege, if confirmed, to forge opportunity out of this crisis. As Americans, we've always risen to the challenge to solve problems and create a brighter future for our students. This was true for my family when my grandparents Avelino and Maria Cardona and Germana Muñiz traveled from the beautiful city of Aguada, Puerto Rico, to find new opportunities in the silver city of Meriden, Connecticut. It was true when my parents, Hector and Sarah, taught me to dream big and to aim high. Their own hard work empowered me to expand my horizons and become the first in my family to graduate college. While we didn't always have a lot of material possessions, I was born rich. This perseverance turned into gratitude when I became a teacher, a principal, a district leader in the very same community that gave me so much as a child. For me, education opened doors. That is the power and the promise of America. but it's not a promise kept for every student. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will work tirelessly to make sure our education system is a door to opportunity, a great equalizer for every student. We will work to reopen schools safely so that students can return to classrooms. We will remove silos in education, sharing our breakthroughs and successes throughout our country, and cultivating schools and colleges as places of innovation. We will make sure that when students graduate from high school, they have college and career pathways to good futures. We will make college accessible to every student who seeks opportunity through education, including strengthening this nation's best kept secret, community colleges. We will ensure that dedicated teachers, paraeducators, principals, superintendents, and committed higher education faculty are recognized for their great contribution to this country. And we will boldly address educational inequities head-on and hold ourselves accountable for providing equitable outcomes from pre-kindergarten through college and into adult learning. Investing in public education changes lives, and it saves lives. I've seen it, and I've lived it. And I know our challenges ahead are problems that we can overcome together. As the saying in Spanish goes, en la unión está la fuerza. In unity, there is strength. We gain strength from joining together. And like our schools, we gain strength when we create a culture of community. That is why, if confirmed, I look forward to sitting at the table with the vast, diverse community of people who have a stake in education: students, parents, teachers, caregivers, advocates, and state, local, and tribal leaders, and the dedicated career staff at the department. Their voices matter. I can think of no higher calling than working to build a better, more equal future for the next generation. I have the same dreams for all of the students in our country as I do for my own Angelito and Celine. I'm grateful for the chance to take on this responsibility, and I'm grateful for your time today. I'm grateful to President Biden and Vice President Harris for placing their trust in me. In closing, as your nominee, I am first a husband of a family school liaison, a father of 2 public high schoolers, an educator, and most importantly, a student advocate. If confirmed, I look forward to getting to work on behalf of all students and working with you to build a future of promise and opportunity for the next generation. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Dr. Cardona, thank you very much. We all appreciate that. We will now begin a round of 5-minute questions, and I would just ask my colleagues to keep track of your clock, if you would. Stay within those 5 minutes so we can respect everyone's time. And I am very happy to stay if anyone has additional questions, if we want a second round for anyone. Dr. Cardona, the COVID-19 pandemic is really having a profound impact on students. Abrupt school closures, lack of access to high-quality remote learning or a conducive learning environment, educator layoffs, and general chaos and confusion has really severely disrupted student learning. So we have a big job ahead of us to help support our students, our educators, and our schools respond to and recover from this pandemic. And that starts with providing schools and colleges with the resources they need to reopen safely for in-person learning. And I was pleased to see President Biden's plan called for significantly more funding. It also demands strong federal leadership to accomplish that goal. But we have a long road ahead. Dr. Cardona, as Connecticut's Commissioner of Education, you've been working every day for the past year to address the needs of students and their families during this pandemic. Talk to us about how your experience in Connecticut informs your work as Secretary of Education in navigating the COVID-19 response.
Thank you for the question, Senator Murray. I want to acknowledge the fact that as a country, we are experiencing some trauma together. and serving as Commissioner of Education in Connecticut has provided the opportunity for me to be in a position to help lead with amazing partners at the agency and throughout the state in the reopening of our schools. Through these last 10 months, I've been able to listen to parents, students, educators, and we all want to make sure we can get our students back into school safely. Some of the strategies that we took in Connecticut that were very clear were to make sure that we relied very closely on the science. We partnered with our public health experts in the state and created a system of communication that was regular and intentional. We were open and transparent with what we knew, and we made sure that we partnered with our health experts to put out very clear guidance early on to make sure that the mitigation strategies were very clear, to make sure that we talked about how to safely reopen schools and how to provide the students the access to learning if they had to learn remotely. We partnered together, and I look forward to, if I'm fortunate enough to serve as Secretary of Education, to bring that same mentality of partnership and clear communication to help recover our public education and reopen our schools.
Thank you very much. You know, one of my greatest concerns about the pandemic's impact on students is learning loss, particularly for students who face systemic barriers, including students of color, students from families with low incomes, LGBTQIA students, students with disabilities, and English learners. And the pandemic has really further widened the achievement gaps in this country. So Dr. Cardona, if you're confirmed as secretary, how would you support states and school districts in identifying and addressing learning loss among all students?
Again, thank you for that question. You know, this learning loss is something that we're all grappling with. But before I get into that, I want to acknowledge our students have shown us a level of resilience that I don't think we've ever seen in history before. Our students have really risen to the occasion and really adapted in ways that are inspiring to me as an educator and as a father. But we know that especially in many communities that don't have great resources, students have not had access to quality learning or have had interrupted learning. So we have to make sure that we identify those practices that we know are effective at meeting students where they are. We know that with proper support and funding, we can offer extended learning opportunities for students, extended summer school options to help students recover some of that loss. And we have to make sure that the materials that we put in front of our students are high quality materials so that our students are able to benefit the most from any intervention or access to learning that they get moving forward. We need to do this not only by providing strong remote access and quality materials there, but ensuring that we're doing everything in our power to safely reopen schools. There is no substitute for a classroom experience for our students being in front of their teacher. There is no substitute for that. So we have to do everything we can to safely reopen schools in a manner that gets the students back into their learning environment.
Thank you very much. I will turn the questions over to Dr. Burke, or to Senator Burke at this point. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You can call me doctor if you'd like to.
Yeah, sorry.
Dr. Cardona, again, welcome to you and to your family. On January 12th, the Fairfax Education Association in Virginia tweeted at you that schools should not reopen until all staff and students had received a vaccine. Do you agree with the Fairfax Education Association on this?
Thank you, Senator. You know, I recognize the frustration and distrust and fear that is out there. And if confirmed as Secretary of Education, I'll do everything in my power to make sure that our rollout strategy for reopening schools includes communication on how to safely reopen schools. And I think that needs to include increased surveillance testing for our educators and a prioritization of our educators for vaccination.
But just to be clear, to safely open a school and to safely keep a school open, it doesn't require that 100% of the participants be vaccinated to accomplish that.
We have examples, and I know in Connecticut we have many examples, but we have great examples throughout our country of schools that are able to reopen safely and do so while following mitigation strategies. While I recognize that that is the case, I do believe that making sure surveillance testing is something that we focus on as
Thank
well.
you. Should teachers be prioritized for vaccination? And when I use the term teachers, does that include public and private school teachers together?
I use the term educators. There's so many members of the school community that contribute to making the school successful. So our educators should be prioritized for vaccination rollout, especially as we work to maintain our schools open. And we have to keep in mind also that reopening schools is not just about the next month or two. If we want to keep them reopened, we have to make sure that we're properly testing our teachers and educators and prioritizing them for vaccination, keeping an eye on the variants and the different changes that might take place. I think it is a priority to provide testing and vaccination for our educators.
And when you use the term educators, you're not separating between public and private?
All educators.
All educators. Thank you. States like Connecticut may want to pursue testing this year just to have some data to understand the learning loss problem they have on their hands. But due to the validity and reliability issues of conducting testing remotely and in hybrid situations, testing experts say that the scores may not even be comparable to scores from before or after COVID-19. It really doesn't seem fair to include test scores in schools' performance accountability measures as required under the ESSA in state plans. Do you plan to waive the need to include scores in school accountability for state plans this year?
Thank you for the question, sir. And I know that not only COVID testing, but assessments are an issue of concern and a great debate. I speak to you now as a nominee. Obviously, I have not had any role in any policy development to this point. I can speak to you from the role of a commissioner. I know that validity of testing is critically important. As a school principal, I remember making sure that assessment data was looked at only if it was valid and reliable. With that said, I don't think I'm in favor of what you called earlier, one size fits all, if the conditions under COVID-19 prevent a student from being in school in person. I don't think we need to be bringing students in just to test them on a standardized test. I don't think that makes any sense. With that said, I do feel, sir, that if we don't assess where our students are and their level of performance, it's going to be difficult for us to provide some targeted support and a resource allocation in the manner that can best support the closing of the gaps that have been exacerbated due to this pandemic.
Do you feel that states should be able to decide whether they incorporate standardized testing this year, given the circumstances of the pandemic?
I feel that states should not only have an opportunity to weigh in on how they plan on implementing it and what's best for their students, but also the accountability measures and whether or not those assessments should really be tied into any accountability measures as well.
Doctor, I thank you. Madam Chairman, I return the time.
All right, Senator Casey.
Madam Chair, thanks very much. I appreciate this opportunity to ask Dr. Cardona a question, but I wanted to start by commending our new chair, Senator Murray, and the ranking member, Senator Burr, for the way they opened this hearing today. We're grateful for their words today. And Dr. Cardona, I want to start by commending you for the achievements in your life to date. I'm not sure there are many, if any, secretaries of education who have served as not only a fourth grade teacher, but also a principal as well as an assistant superintendent, and then finally as education commissioner. So you're not only well qualified, but I think your story is a great American story of hard work and sacrifice. And we're grateful that you're willing to put yourself forward for additional public service. I want to try to get to two issues. The first will take a little longer because it's a particular issue that affects students with disabilities. And the second is a question about early learning. But let me start with the question regarding students with disabilities and this unique issue. Students with disabilities face significant barriers to entering and completing post-secondary education. Federally funded research found that students with learning disabilities attend college at half the rate of their peers who don't have disabilities, and are less likely to complete their programs. Few students, we're told it's about 1 in 4, with learning disabilities inform their colleges that they have a disability. And many high school students with disabilities and their parents find the process to secure both accommodations and services in colleges both difficult and unclear. I've got legislation with Senator Cassidy that would ease the transition by, among other things, ensuring institutions of higher education make information about requesting an accommodation or transparent for both the prospective student as well as current students. And also this legislation would ensure that proof of a disability in K through 12 education is sufficient to receive accommodations in higher education settings. President Biden's education agenda indicated he would increase funding for post-secondary programs that support students with disabilities and will direct the Department of Education to provide guidance to those post-secondary programs. So I guess the two-part question here is, how will you ensure that students with disabilities have increased access to post-secondary education? And second, how will you make sure that those higher education institutions are prepared to support and provide services to students with disabilities?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do acknowledge that, the dream of higher education, or the goal of higher education, is one that we have to expand in our country. And it's one that I'm committed to serving and working with you and others to learn more about and see how we can, at the agency, if confirmed, support that work. Helping students gain access to higher education is a process that does require coordination and collaboration with our pre-K-12 systems and our higher education systems, clarity in communication and expectations, and really just a culture of not only looking at these students as students with disabilities, but looking at them as students with assets, students with great abilities who have to learn a certain way or require accommodations. So I think that cultural shift is a prerequisite to any technical strategies. With that said, our agency would be poised to not only look for best practices across our country of where they're doing it right and where they're finding success and sharing those best practices, but also ensuring that we're looking at how these universities what outcomes they're getting when serving students with disabilities, making sure that we're partnering with them, but also keeping an eye on how our students with disabilities are faring in these colleges. So something that I'm pretty passionate about as well. And I look forward to working with you and others to learn more about it and see how we can support. Thank you.
Very much, and I know I'm short on time, but I'll just maybe I'll submit a longer question for the record. But the question pertains to early education. I like to say that if kids learn more now, they're going to earn more later. I think all the evidence shows that. I will submit a question regarding expanding access to early learning, early care and learning, and also about the coordination between and among federal government agencies and programs. But now that I'm down to 6 seconds, I'll leave that for a written question, possibly in the second round. But I know you have a broad experience in early learning, and we'll speak to that a little later. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Senator Casey. We will turn to Senator Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I look forward to working with you and Ranking Member Burr this year. Dr. Cardona, I want to thank you for sharing your inspiring story with us today. I think it is a perfect role model for so many children in this country. I also appreciate the time that you took to meet with me, and I want to bring up two issues that we touched on in those meetings. There is a lot of focus, and understandably so in this country, on low-income children in large urban schools. But we also have a lot of low-income children in rural schools. Along with former Senator Ken Conrad, I authored the Rural Education Achievement Program known as REAP, and in 2015, that program was reauthorized. It is the only direct federal support for small, rural, low-income schools. For example, island schools off the coast of Maine have used it to buy technology to connect their students and enrich their learning experience. This program is really vital. Yet last year, the department announced changes in the formula that was used to determine eligibility for the REAP program. The result was that it would have abruptly eliminated funding for more than 100 rural low-income school districts in the state of Maine. When we talked one-on-one, I went into more detail about the devastating impact of this. I'm seeking today, as you testify, your commitment to work with me to resolve the formula issues so that the rural low-income students across our country, it wasn't just in Maine that this eligibility change had this effect, will receive the funding that the REAP program envisioned.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I recognize and through the great conversation I had with you, the challenges that rural communities face. And I commit to looking at this very closely if confirmed and working with you and others to learn more about how these issues in rural communities really need more attention. I'll tell you, during the pandemic, in a small state like Connecticut, we found that our rural communities were facing challenges that were different than urban centers. And they were equally as important. Connectivity was an issue. And accessing high quality content is only dependent on how well your signal is. So I recall those conversations with parents and students and educators in the rural communities. And I recognize after the conversation with you and others, the importance that this has in our country, not only with the pandemic, but past the pandemic, making sure that the needs of our students in rural communities are being met. I look forward to learning more about it from you and your colleagues, but also serving to do the best we can as the agency to make sure we're meeting the needs of those learners as well.
Thank you. The second issue I want to bring up has to do with the TRIO programs, which I am a big supporter of, which help first-generation disadvantaged students pursue higher education. And there are many incredibly dedicated people at the Department of Education. Let me make that clear, but let me tell you what happened a few years ago. The department made a very abrupt bureaucratic decision, really embodies the worst of bureaucracy, that denied funding to an upward bound program in my state on the basis of a formatting problem in the application. And this was a spacing problem. Instead of being double spaced in a particular graph, it was 1.5 spaces. That's how minor. And the University of Maine at Prescott was not given an opportunity to correct this. Well, the result of this would have been that more than 900 students would have been denied access to the Upward Bound program over a 5-year program of the grant. And I worked with other senators. Senator Murray was one who also signed the letter. Senator Tester, there were many senators on both sides of the aisle. We sent 3 letters to the department saying, this is ridiculous. This is not, the format is not dictated by law. This is arbitrary. In the case of Maine's application, it was in a graph that it was included in a 65-page application, and yet it wasn't even reviewed for the merits. Well, the department only changed course after I added language to the appropriations bill. It should not have taken legislative language in an appropriations bill to get the department to prioritize the needs of disadvantaged students participating in the Upward Bound program over bureaucratic formatting errors. And I would just ask again for your commitment to make sure that we take a more common sense approach and always remember that the students come first.
Thank you, Senator. I commit not only to a strong partnership and ability to work with you, and I also want to commit, if confirmed, that our agency will be a service agency, making sure that our students' needs are at the forefront.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Cardona, congratulations on your nomination. You were a first-generation college student, and for you and for me, an affordable college education opened a million doors. But today's students face a very different situation. So I want to talk with you today about student debt. I know you know these facts, but I think it helps everyone if we can just talk about them for a few minutes. So about 43 million people, that's 1 in 5 adults in America, have federal student loan debt. Is that right?
That is right.
Good. And this debt adds up to more than about $1.5 trillion. Now, about 40% of the people with student loan debt do not have a college degree. Can you just say a word about what that means for them?
Well, what it means is that because they don't have the college degree, maybe they don't have the income potential that they would have had if they had the degree, and paying these bills will be a larger task and probably a longer process.
Debt. Dr. Cardona?
Yes, can you hear me? So I said that students that are not able to graduate and probably would have their income affected because they weren't able to graduate and get the income earning potential that they would have had if they did, and they're probably in greater debt, and it may be more of a challenge to pay off their debt.
We may have lost Senator Warren. Did we lose her video?
Patty, I think we did lose.
Okay, I believe we've lost Senator Warren. We'll try and get back to you when you are. Is she there, Senator Warren? Okay, we lost you for a minute. Go ahead. Okay, we seem to be having connection problems with Senator Warren. Let's see if we can fix that, and we will move to Senator Paul and then go back to her.
Okay.
The Office of Civil Rights sent a letter to Connecticut saying that boys can't compete with girls in sports, or
So
they
what's
shouldn't be
happening here?
forced to allow boys to compete in girls' sports. If you're confirmed, will you enforce that Office of Civil Rights opinion?
Hello, Senator. Thank you for the question. I understand that there are a lot of concerns about that. If confirmed, it's my responsibility and my privilege to make sure that we're following our civil rights of all students. And that includes activities that they may engage in high school or in athletics.
What do you think in general about boys running in girls' track meets like they've been doing in Connecticut?
I think that it's critically important that education systems and educators respect the rights of all students, including students who are transgender, and that they are afforded the opportunities that every other student has to participate in extracurricular activities.
Does it bother you that like the top 20% of boys running in track meets beat all of the girls in the state, and that it, would be, completely destroy girls' athletics? The girls are being pushed out. They don't make the finals in the state meet. They don't get college scholarships. That is really detrimental to girls' sports. Do you worry about having boys running girls' track meets?
I recognize and appreciate the concerns and the frustrations that are expressed. I've as Commissioner of Education, have had conversations with families who have felt the way you just described it, and families of students who are transgender. So I understand that this is a challenge. I look forward to working with you and others to,
Do you think it's fair to
Communicate.
have boys running in the girls' track meet?
I think it's appropriate for, I think it's the legal responsibility of schools to provide opportunities for students to participate in activities, and this includes students who are transgender.
So you don't have a problem then with boys running in the girls' track meet, swimming